Okay, first question, why? Why are fishery boards and fishery trusts so keen to plant trees? Now, it's a fair question to ask, and indeed many do. I think we all appreciate the severity of the situation. Scotland's iconic wild salmon stocks are approaching crisis point with increasing pressures in and around our rivers and seas. But how will planting trees help us out of this situation? Well, the number one reason is because of rising river temperatures under climate change scenarios. It's not good news for species that need cold, oxygenated water. When it comes to salmon, water temperatures above 23 degrees create thermal stress, so they stop feeding and are more susceptible to predation and disease. Now, in 2018, which was our hot summer, over 2/3 of Scottish rivers experienced temperatures that cause thermal stress in salmon. We know these conditions will become more commonplace in the future as well. On the Dee, the temperatures that year reached 27.5 degrees. Now, this contrasts with our fishery board reports from back in 1921, where they were raising concerns about mid-June water temperatures reaching just 15 degrees. For juvenile salmon, it is crucial that they have the best conditions in which to thrive and grow strong before they embark on their marine migration, as John demonstrated earlier with his graph on smolt survival and smolt size. The expansion of native woodland is a major factor in giving these fish the rich, robust habitat that they need to grow strong. Rising water temperatures will be a bigger concern when there are few trees to provide this cooling shade, so there is a clear need for urgent action to create native woodland cover along our riverbanks and make our river catchments more resilient for the future. Okay, I believe 9 fishery boards and river trusts have been collaborating with Marine Scotland Science to produce the Scotland River Temperature Monitoring Network, which was also mentioned by John earlier this morning. Now, this data underpins the modelling of future temperature changes for all river networks in Scotland. The output includes mapping tools and advice on where impacts are likely to be greatest. So this map on the left, where the warmer colours are showing where impacts are likely to be greatest. The mapping can provide a guide as to where the priority areas are for us to focus on. The output from this also includes tree planting guidance on where to best plant to reduce temperature impacts. And done appropriately, 50% tree cover can reduce stream temperatures by 2 to 3 degrees. Other benefits of the native woodland to rivers include carbon storage, enhanced biodiversity through provision of food for aquatic species, enhanced aquatic habitat through woody debris input into the river, habitat linkages, logs and other woody debris to slow flood flows. They reduce erosion, help stabilise banks and thereby alleviate the widening of stream channels. Riverbank trees also help improve water quality, and when planted at scale, they can provide a contribution to flood management through slowing runoff and infiltration rates. Now, just about all of these benefits also specifically help salmon. Okay, on the Dee, we've planted 250,000 riverbank trees now, and we have a target of 1 million trees. You may have seen our 1 million tree campaign that we launched last year. It sounds like a lot of trees to some, but just to put it into perspective, to achieve significant scale riverbank woodland, it would take much less than 1% of the Dee catchment, less than 1,000 hectares. So we're really talking small areas of land for relatively big gains. Now, key to achieving this has been working with the landowners, managers, keepers and farmers who may be supportive, but they also may often have reservations as well. So our approach has been always to plan the tree planting to fit in with the topography of the landscape and also the existing land management. Now, our preferred method is large-scale enclosures, as they provide greater scale of benefits and are relatively less costly. However, we just have to work with whatever the constraints and challenges are at a given site. So one of the big challenges we face is in the uplands, the land is predominantly managed for sporting interests, and so there are livestock and or deer present. And generally, this leads to very high grazing pressure, And so most of the riverbank woodland that's established on the eastern side of the Cairngorms needs some form of protection, be it fences or tree guards. And this all creates a requirement for high levels of infrastructure to ensure that these various land uses can coexist. The sites to work in are also typically remote. They're away from public roads, they're in environmentally sensitive areas such as peatlands, and they feature tributaries and sub-tributary streams that need to be incorporated into our planting and infrastructure plans. In addition, then, we've got hard winters and floods to account for, which requires extra maintenance. So overall, it can be actually quite hard to plant trees here. But it's our key battleground in the fight against increasing temperatures, as predictions are that it's these exposed upland streams that are going to be most vulnerable to rising temperatures. Coming on to small enclosures, well, our large woodland enclosures are not always appropriate in the context of the uplands. So we've been trialling small enclosures for the last 8 years, just like in the photo here. And we've now put in just over 1,300 of these. These are stock fenced rectangular enclosures containing just 20 to 30 trees each. The theory of them is that the deer won't jump into this confined and sort of spiky space created by the tree tubes and the tree stakes. The downsides of small enclosures are they are not functioning woodland, they're expensive, and there's no government forestry grant for them, and maintenance of them is required as well. However, they allow trees where otherwise we would have nothing. So 6 years ago, there were no trees on the Upper Gairn, which is one of the Dee's big upland tributaries. But now we have 25,000 trees there, and that's just through the small enclosures. So they also help people to get used to the idea of having trees in the landscape, allowing them to overcome some of their reservations. So in the future, there may be the possibility for much larger planting. And of course, these trees provide a seed source for the future as well. On to funding. Funding for the establishment of trees in the uplands has come primarily from the SRDP Forestry Grant Scheme, which is administered by Scottish Forestry. However, there are some challenges with this funding. Firstly, it does not provide full funding. So typically it provides about 2/3 of the cost of deer fencing, although it can be even lower at some sites. It also does not fund for some of the other infrastructure, such as water gates, marking against bird strikes, carrying out peat surveys, and things like rabbit netting and vole guards. Also, because of the challenges with planting along riverbanks, particularly in the uplands, scheme applications are often penalised by being scored low value for money because they require relatively high sort of capital input in relation to the area planted. And these trees are not being planted for commercial harvest, but rather for the crucial ecological goods and services that they provide. The restored wooded habitat will remain in place as a permanent feature to enrich the ecosystem. At the moment, this isn't taken into account in the scheme applications. So the Forestry Grant Scheme clearly needs to be reformed to directly tackle the climate change impacts in sensitive areas, as well as providing maximum conservation benefits. And given these failings, our delivery has only been possible from the support of other funders, in particular the Woodland Trust for Scotland, Cairngorms National Park Authority and Nature Scot, through their Biodiversity Challenge Fund and also a previous EU LIFE project, Pearls in Peril. And in addition, our small enclosures are funded through individual and company charitable donations, as well as these environmental schemes like Pearls in Peril and Biodiversity Challenge Fund. Okay, I just wanted to give a mention to a new project called Riverwoods. This, alongside its counterpart in England and Wales, which is called Trees for Water, is being set up to encourage collaboration and best practice of fishery organisations so that they can achieve riverbank tree planting. It was developed just last year and is supported by the Fishmongers Company. Its focus is on achieving delivery of tree planting at a national scale. Now, the first meeting of the project partners for this was just a fortnight ago, so it's very recently set up, and management of it is being led by the Tweed Forum. It is planned that it will provide direct support to our sector with a staffing resource, expertise and guidance, and access to funding. So I've listed project partners at the bottom of this screen. It's quite a varied list to cover the many different strands we need to achieve this goal. Okay, in terms of helping to create thriving salmon population in rivers, we can also be looking at things such as creating more large woody structures in suitable locations. So these two photos here are both of large woody structures we've put in. They provide great habitat both directly and indirectly through their impact on water flows. So we've found, for example, they have been really good at creating spawning substrates. We can also look to reinstate wetlands and bogs and ensure floodplains are functioning effectively. So this all helps to regulate river flows and provide clean water. And we can consider adding nutrients, replacing those which have been lost through the lower return rate of spawning salmon into catchments and the input that once would have been received from the riverbank trees. This is relatively experimental at this stage. But all these additional works are really about finding other ways that we can help the rivers to function more naturally, which to some extent will be taken care of once our riverbank trees mature into functioning woodlands. Okay, so just to conclude, Scotland gains significant climate and biodiversity benefits from well-placed woodland planting along riverbanks. And back to the very starting question, fishery organisations should be leading the delivery of this because of the huge benefits that trees provide to salmon. Degradation of rivers and salmon habitats has been happening for so long, there's few examples really of what our rivers should look like. And it's easy to forget our salmon should be living in a wooded landscape. And with more recent impacts on their marine habitat, salmon are being hit with challenges at each step of their journey. So will it be climate changes in the next few decades that pushes them over the brink? Let's not find out. Also, from a pragmatic point of view, the country's fishery trusts and salmon fishery boards have shown that they can work in partnership to deliver these sensitive fishery protection projects. And then finally, the government's forestry grant scheme must catch up with the critical conservation need to safeguard our rivers from climate change. I've recently learned the next buzzphrase, charismatic carbon, which refers to carbon offsetting that provides other benefits such as for biodiversity, rather than the standard carbon offsetting from planting fast-growing monocultures in a featureless way simply to allow companies to tick their green credentials box. Well, it's charismatic carbon that we're creating, and I think we should get some support to deliver it.